Hi friends, welcome back to 10-minute recaps. Today, I'm going to explain a supernatural horror thriller film from 2014, titled, It Follows. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. In a peaceful neighborhood, Annie storms out of her home as if running for her life. The sound of the door opening causes her to stop in the middle of the road. She slowly backs away while her eyes trail at something. Her father comes out of the house and calls out to her. Annie lies to her neighbor and her father, saying that she's okay. Finally, she circles back to her home with her father following inside. But she frantically exits again, now with her car keys in hand, and drives away. Even as she's driving, she keeps looking over her shoulder, panic in her eyes and ignoring her ringing phone. That evening, Annie parks her car by the beach. Shaken and crying, she finally answers her phone. With her eyes focused on the space around her car, she apologizes to her father and tells him that she loves him. Annie is tired of running and waits for what lies ahead. Annie is found at the beach in the morning, dead with her leg morbidly bent and broken. In another part of the suburbs, Jay relaxes in the pool. Her sister, Kelly, invites her to watch a movie with her friends, but Jay refuses. She has a date later that day. After Kelly leaves, Jay smiles and calls out the boys next door who are watching her swim. Inside their home, Kelly is watching a movie with her friends, Paul and Yara, while their mom is at the dining table. Jay heads up to her room, quietly preparing for her date. At the movie theater, Jay teaches Hugh, her date, a game that she and her sister play. Hugh chooses a person in the theater he wants to trade places with, and Jay has to guess who he chose. When it's Hugh's turn to guess, he points to a girl in a yellow dress. But Jay doesn't see her. Dread fills Hugh. He immediately urges Jay to leave the theater with him. He claims that he didn't feel comfortable being there. They continue the date with dinner, and everything seemed to be going well despite what happened in the theater. The next day, Jay walks with her sister. They talk about Hugh. Jay is giddy about him but is still concerned about his behavior in the theater. Even though she accepted his story that he wasn't feeling well, Jay is still suspicious that he was hiding something. Before reaching their house, Kelly waves to their neighbor, Greg. During their next date, Hugh takes Jay out to a secluded area. The two spend a passionate night in his car for the first time. Afterwards, Jay reminisces about her views on love until Hugh chloroforms her. Jay tries to fight him back, but Hugh overpowers her and she passes out. Jay wakes up tied to a wheelchair in an abandoned building. Hugh apologizes and assures her that he won't hurt her, that he only needed time to explain things to her. An entity will start to follow her, and it will kill her if it catches her. It used to follow him, and now he passed it on to her. It can look like anyone, even someone that she knows. The dazed Jay starts screaming for help, still in disbelief of what he said, until Hugh reels her to the edge of the building to show that it was coming. Jay sees a strange woman slowly walking towards the building. Hugh instructs her that she has to sleep with someone else to pass it along and that if it kills her, it will come after him next. Confused and afraid, Jay cries as Hugh takes her back in his car and drives away. Kelly and her friends play cards back at their house when they witness Hugh dropping off Jay in the middle of the road. The three rush to her aid and calls the cops, who interrogate the distraught Jay about what happened. The police try to track down Hugh, but they couldn't find him since he had used a fake name. Days later, Jay is still struggling to make sense of what happened. While in the bathroom, a ball bounces off the window, startling her. She looks out the window, not seeing the boy from next door peeking at her from the window. At school, Jay attends a class. She sees an old woman outside the window, seemingly heading towards her. The old woman looks out of place, but no one else seemed to mind her. Hugh's warnings about the entity come back to her, and she hurriedly leaves the class. The entity gets close to her, and she confirms that the students around don't see it. Scared, she gets into her car and leaves. Jay heads to the ice cream shop where Kelly and Paul work. She tells them the story Hugh told her. None of them could believe it, not even Jay. But Paul offers to stay at their house for the night nonetheless to watch over them. Yara joins them to sleep over as well. That evening, Jay couldn't sleep and joins Paul in the living room to watch a movie. Paul sees Jay's unease and tries to comfort her. While reminiscing about their childhood, they hear the kitchen window breaking. Paul goes to investigate but claims that no one was there. He heads upstairs to wake up Kelly, leaving Jay alone. She walks into the kitchen nervously and sees a woman there, limping towards her. Jay screams and rushes upstairs to her room. Kelly and Paul beg her to let them in, still convinced that there's no one else in the house. Jay, who's starting to believe Hugh's story about the creature, collapses in fear and panic with Kelly comforting her. A still sleepy Yara knocks on the door, and Kelly opens it, despite Jay's warnings. Jay is relieved that Yara is alone, standing at the doorway. But a tall man appears behind Yara. Jay screams and climbs out of the balcony to escape. Outside, Greg spots Jay riding away on a bicycle, with her friends and sister yelling for her. Jay stops at a nearby playground and sits on a swing set. She looks around, wary of every sound, thinking that the entity will catch up to her. When she sees movement in the distance, she freezes until Paul calls her. The others try to calm her down. Greg catches up to them, curious about what happened. Jay decides that she needs to find Hugh to figure out what was really happening. Greg offers to help them. They visit the address Hugh gave Jay when they were dating and sees that it's an abandoned-looking house. They investigate the items littered in the place, hoping to find clues that Hugh might have left behind. Paul finds a high school photo of Hugh with a girl. Recognizing the school's logo, they track him down and discover that his real name is Jeff Redmond. Kelly suggests telling the police, but Jay decides not to. She wants to get answers from him directly. They visit Jeff's real address, where Jay meets his mother. She recognizes her face, realizing that the entity had taken Jeff's mother's form during the first night she saw it. Jeff apologizes to Jay and tells her more about his story. He says that the curse was passed down to him after having a one-night stand with a girl from a bar. Jeff insists that it's real and Jay should pass it to someone else, but her friends are still skeptical about it, thinking it's just a trick. Greg invites them to his family's lake house to get away. While Jay sleeps, Paul watches over her, considering Jeff's suggestion of Jay passing the curse. The following day, Greg teaches Jay how to use a revolver to protect herself. While hanging out by the shore with Paul, Kelly, and Yara, the entity takes in Yara's form and attacks Jay. Paul grabs a lounge chair and hits it despite not being able to see the entity. It releases Jay but shoves Paul back. They run into the shed, where Jay grabs the revolver and starts shooting the entity. It collapses but gets back up immediately, seemingly unharmed. Jay shuts the door, realizing that she can't harm it with a gun, and recoils back. The entity bangs on the door until it creates a hole. Jay stares at the spot, expecting the entity to crawl inside. But instead of it, Greg looks inside, asking what's going on. He still refuses to believe the entity is real, having not witnessed Jay getting attacked. When he leaves, Jay crawls slowly towards the door, wondering if it was safe. But the entity looks into the hole, now looking like the boy who lives next door to their house. Jay rushes to open another exit and takes Greg's car, the entity still following behind. Panicked and distressed, Jay crashes the vehicle into a cornfield. She wakes up in the hospital with a broken arm and her friends asleep at her side. Jay looks out to the open door, listening to the sound of footsteps with a shaky breath. She waits for the entity to walk in, but instead, a doctor walks past her room. Relieved, she turns to Greg. Tired of her situation, Jay finally decides to do as Jeff suggested, passing down the curse to someone. Greg and Jay have intercourse that evening in the hospital. Days later, Greg goes about his life normally without seeing the entity. Despite this, Jay still confines herself in her room, scared. She watches Greg's house one night from her window vigilantly, in case it comes back. She spots a person walking to Greg's house. It breaks the window as Jay starts calling Greg. He doesn't answer the phone, and the entity has entered the house. Jay runs to Greg's house to warn him, but the creature is already in his bedroom, banging on his door while looking like his mother. Jay watches the entity attack Greg. She's too late. Knowing that she's next, she drives away in grief and fear of what she just witnessed. She stops near the beach and falls asleep. In the morning, she spots 3 men on a boat. She begins to undress and swims into the water to meet with the men. Back in her home, Paul visits Jay and offers to let her pass the curse to him, but she refuses. Paul confesses that he likes her and questions why she chose to pass it on to Greg. Jay thought he'd be okay because he wasn't scared. She regrets having done so. Looking around her room, Paul gets an idea on how to stop the entity. As they drive away from her house, Jay spots the entity, looking like her grandfather, on the roof. The entity has killed the men she was with at the boat and is now back to hunting her. Jay, Paul, Kelly, and Yara go to a closed pool to prepare to face the entity. They set up electrical items around the pool while Jay goes in the water, waiting for it to arrive. A thunderstorm rages outside while they wait. Jay finally spots the entity entering. Hearing the fear in her voice, Kelly asks her what it looked like, but Jay refuses to tell her. Jay freaks out, wanting to get out of the pool. But Paul encourages her to stay until the entity goes in the water with her. But instead of going in the water, the entity starts throwing the electrical items at her. Jay points at the entity to help her friends attack it as it continues to hurl items at her, causing her to sink in the water. She resurfaces and looks at the entity, who now wears the face of her deceased father. Paul grabs a gun, relying on Jay's directions to shoot at it. With the entity invisible to him, he gets too close, nearly getting caught by it. He takes a shot, seeing the floating hairdryer in front of him, but accidentally hits Yara's leg. It continues throwing things at Jay, hitting her on the arm. Kelly grabs a blanket and throws it over the entity to help Paul. When she finally cloaks the entity, Paul shoots the entity on the head before it collapses into the water. Jay hurriedly swims to the side, but the entity grabs her by the leg, pulling her down. Paul continues to fire the gun into the water, estimating its position. He finally shoots it on the head again, and Jay is free. Kelly helps Jay get out of the pool. Paul asks her if the entity was still alive. Jay carefully takes a peek at the pool to see. When she looks into the water, blood is spreading, turning the pool completely red. After the event, Paul and Jay spend an intimate night together. When Jay is asleep, Paul drives around and spots a couple of prostitutes. An idea forms in his head, a way to divert the entity if it was still alive. Jay and Paul walk together, hand in hand. They enjoy the little peace that they have, not noticing the figure walking behind them in the distance. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hit that like button if you did, subscribe if you're new. And at last, I'll say stay well, stay safe, thanks.